Welcome to a Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Well, hello. Today I am happy to welcome John Nachlinger to the podcast. John is not only a divorce attorney and the co-owner of New Jersey law firm and mediation firm Netsquire, he's also a divorce coach, and he specializes in helping men. The name of his company is Divorce Shield. So he helps men navigate the divorce process. So John, I'm so happy to welcome you to a Better Divorce podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So we've known each other, I think, about 7 years now, and I've seen your law practice change. And we're both divorce lawyers, on the opposite sides of the Hudson River, basically. But what would you say are the biggest changes in your divorce practice over this time?
Well, I was a traditional divorce attorney where I was going to court every day, Andrea, and fighting the good fight, doing trials, really doing people's bidding. I say that because most of the time when you get to a trial, it's really not about the thing you're fighting about. It's about people wanting to win and them really wanting to, beat their spouse for whatever reason. Maybe their spouse cheated on them and they're upset about it, or they really have a strong feeling about their children having to have a certain custody arrangement. But after I went through all of that, I kind of got to the point where I recognized that most people, and by most I mean 90% of people, can and should be able to resolve their entire divorce within a handful of months without going through any litigation process, without ever going to court. Whether that's collaborative law or mediation, that there's just better ways. Your podcast is aptly named. It is a better divorce is any divorce where you do not go to court. And so seeing that, my partner and I just recognized that there was a need in the community for a firm that specializes in just the mediation part of this. We don't do collaborative law like you do, but the mediation part of this, and recognizing that you don't have to have attorneys. You can just come to a mediator and sit down and try to work through issues. So we decided that it was an unserved sort of part of our community, and so we have transitioned our entire practice to just do mediation and divorce settlement type work.
You came over to the bright side.
Yeah.
Welcome.
It's so much nicer over here. The sun is great.
Warmer, sunny, breezy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not as weighed down by, what the court system, what might happen to our clients. We're helping our clients create their future, right? And work with their soon to be ex to really figure out what works for them and their family. I think it's so much healthier, and I'm thrilled to see that you and Christina have moved in that direction as well. So now you just mediate, and primarily you mediate, and so anything anything that you've seen in your mediation practice that is that you're doing differently than other mediators in your area, or is it, how are you working?
Yeah, I would say we actually do the entire from A to Z. So what I mean by that is we do mediation, then we draft the legal document that the two parties will sign, which actually resolves, everything: custody, support, division of their stuff, and then we get them divorced. So a lot of mediators are a little gun shy about doing anything beyond mediation and just drafting sort of bullet points of here's what the agreement was, and then they send people off to attorneys to put it into legal form and get them divorced. But we sort of recognize that a lot of people, that's an added expense that for a lot of people is really just not necessary. And so, because I've sent mediations to people before, Andrea, after I've drafted a memorandum of understanding, which is that bullet point document. And they've incurred thousands and thousands of more dollars of legal fees that in my view was completely unnecessary. And so we've come up with a program, a flat fee program, where people can come to us and here's what it is. This is how much it's going to cost for both of you. Obviously, if mediation takes longer than anticipated, there's additional costs, but still, it's premised on the fact that people want certainty. They want it done quickly. They want it done fairly, but they need certainty. They like the certainty of how much it's going to cost and that it's all going to be done. And they're not going to get done with us and be like, oh, now I have to go find somebody else and I have to pay that person. And then, where does it end? So that's sort of our approach. And I love it. I mediate every week several times, and people are getting their cases resolved in 3 to 6 hours. 3 to 6 hours, I can resolve a whole divorce because, quite frankly, I think a lot of mediators spend a little too much time, Andrea, on your goals and what are you looking for and all this other stuff, when a lot of times people, they're ready to get divorced. Like, let's get down and let's figure it out and let's get to work. And that's sort of the approach that I take.
Amazing. Good. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk more about that. I'm doing that so quickly. We do agreements here too. As when we're mediating, we help them come to an agreement and then we draft that agreement. So I agree. If you're a lawyer, you should be using those skills to draft the agreement for the clients. No need to send them somewhere else for that. But what sets you apart from other attorneys and mediators, and something I'm doing as well, is I'm becoming certified to be a coach, but you are a coach. You have a divorce coaching company. So when and why did you add divorce coaching that it's focused on men? How did that come to be?
Well, during the pandemic, I think a lot of us sort of opened our eyes a little bit more. We all took a little bit of a break and actually re-examined, our careers, the way we were doing business, what we wanted out of life. And as part of my, reflection, I recognized that I really could serve a broader population than just people who want to get a divorce in New Jersey. Because as an attorney, you can only service people, where you live or where you're licensed. And also, it was the mechanics of getting divorced. So many of our clients, really need, I'll call it extra legal services. They need someone who actually can just be there for them, talk them through what's going on, but not from a law perspective, not about like how, a lawyer really is the person who is sort of back in the kitchen actually making the food. Like, they're the one actually like getting it done, getting it to the point where it's ingredients to a finished product. Sometimes you need somebody to sort of just talk to you about which ingredients you even want. Like, what is it that you want? What is the food that you really want at the end of the day? Because lawyers, it's been my experience anyway, that most lawyers kind of have a script. Like, when someone comes into their office and gives them a certain set of facts, they have a way they look at it, because we're all creatures of habit. They just look at it that way. And so a lot of people end up being forced into their lawyer's sort of sense of how the case should go, as opposed to really concentrating on what they really want or what they desire or what they need. So men are absolutely the worst at this, because a lot of women will talk to their friends, their family. They'll go out and they'll interview multiple divorce attorneys. They'll have a good sense of what they want out of things before they start the process. And when they're ready to start a divorce, a lot of times women, they've already gotten to the point where they're ready. They're like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Men, on the other hand, and unless it's some reason that they want to get divorced, like they found their wife cheating on them or something, and their gut instinct is just, I want to get divorced. But men, if they're sort of on the other side of this, they have not had the same process that they've gone through, Andrea, because most men don't feel comfortable talking to their guy friends about what's going on in their life. So even if their marriage has been on the rocks, or there's been signs that it's been going downhill, or their wife has flat out told them things are not going well, and a man just ignores it or doesn't hear what's being said, if they're caught off guard, it's difficult for them to sort of process what's happening to them while they've got their wife's attorney sending them a letter saying, I've been retained. It's just too much. And so what ends up happening with a lot of our guy clients is they go through the stages of grief, but like during the divorce process. And so you get to the anger part of the grief process, and that's what causes divorces to be inflamed. It's not because somebody is disagreeing about what should happen. It's just they're not there emotionally.
No.
So men don't have the resources that women have. You and I talked about this the other day, Andrea, but if you go online, if you look at divorce coaches, just type in divorce coach, I guarantee you it probably 9 times out of 10, you're going to find it's a woman, and all of the content on their website, it is geared towards women. I mean, even the color palettes, the words that are used, it's all geared towards women. Men have a different set of fears. And, what are the two major fears that all men have? I mean, all of them, that their kids are going to get taken away from them, and they're going to have to give all their money to their spouse. Like, it's like this all or nothing thing. It's like, I'm not going to have my kids. I'm not going to have any money. I'm going to be living in a van down by the river. Like, they have this fear that's totally unfounded, but you know how fear is, Andrea. It can be as unfounded as you think it is, but it's still a fear you have. It still needs to be addressed. And until it's addressed, you can't really move forward. So I saw that and I was like, you know what? I can use the skill sets I've developed over 20 years to talk to guys, and I can use the authority of the experience to let them know it's going to be okay. And let them know that some of these things are going to happen whether you like it or not. It's how you deal with it, how you process it, that's going to determine whether you're this broken person that spends the next 5 or 10 years holed up in your house, drinking yourself into oblivion and being miserable, or whether you look at it as this chapter's closing, a new chapter is opening, and let's figure out how to make the best use of the rest of your life.
That's a service that is so needed, because you're so right that women are thinking about divorce for years or decades before they tell their spouse that they want a divorce. But they've been thinking about it. They know all the reasons why. They're keeping the list in their heads of all the things that they're not happy with and what was done, what happened. And the men don't know, or completely don't expect this. They're not ready for it. And like you said, one has been grieving for years and is at a whole different stage and then the men have to come up to speed. It's so common in heterosexual marriages. And so we have to find support for the men, usually, to be pushed forward a little, even when they're not comfortable. And that's what you're doing. You're helping them to get in the right mindset. And the women to be, probably slow down a bit because they're so far ahead. So the divorce coaches are helpful for the women on that side too. But why do you think, other than that there are different places in their life or in their relationship, why do you think men are so surprised? And why don't women understand why the men are surprised that they want a divorce and that they've been unhappy all these years? What do you think's going into that? Creating that?
It's interesting. So I have a podcast too, Andrea, Get Divorced Without Getting Screwed. And I have interviewed many men that have been through divorce, some anonymous. Like, I've actually had several that just didn't want to be seen, which is sort of evidence of how men feel about this. They don't mind telling their story. They just don't want anyone else to know it's them telling the story. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But if you listen to those interviews and you just talk to men in general, they all knew this was coming. They just chose to not hear it.
Mm-hmm.
They just chose to not hear it. I was actually last night watching that show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I had never seen it before.
Love that show. Just ended.
I was just watching the episode where the wife comes in and tells her husband, like, I'm moving to Paris, I'm miserable. And he just sits there and doesn't hear anything she's saying. But then later on, when questioned by the daughter, remembers everything she said. So it's like this selective hearing. It's like a 10-year-old. I have a 10-year-old daughter. It's like I say something to her, she ignores me, but then later on she did hear me. She just didn't process it. Men are like that. All men are like that. And but the problem is that women communicate different than men. A lot of women are, maybe they'll talk in a little bit more of a passive way, talking about how unhappy they are. But unless there's a threat, like, I'm going to leave you, I'm walking out, unless something happens, a lot of men don't hear the complaints as being really the same thing as, we never go anywhere, we never do anything, you never let me do anything, whatever the complaints are. And so I think that's what it is. I really think it's, men are for Mars, women are for Venus type of thing. It's just people, men and women communicate so differently that I think that's why marriage counseling can be very effective at just getting people to hear each other and see if you can repair. But by the time you get to this point, obviously, there's, like we just were talking about, a lot of women have already decided, I'm done.
Right.
So nothing's going to fix it. And then men just get back into it's almost like they're a wounded animal. They didn't hear it, or they did hear it and they chose to ignore it. And now they've got so much fear about what's going to happen that it paralyzes them. And a lot of times they just put their head in the ground. And
Yeah.
so that's where I come in and I yank their head out of the ground, smack them across the face a few times, and just say, listen, I'm safe. You can tell me anything you want. A lot of guys, I guarantee you, have cried for the first time in years when they talk to me. And they just cry, they get it out of their system. And once they realize everything's going to be okay and they talk through issues, I don't think their wives, of course, we're talking about heterosexual couples using husband and wife, but I don't think their wives fully appreciate that just allowing their husbands to have a short time to process this, talk to someone, will allow the divorce to be better, to get a better result for everybody, for you not to spend as much money, as much time, for you and your spouse not to hate each other, especially kids. You shouldn't hate each other whenever the divorce is done, because that's not what's good for your kids. So yeah, so I think that's really its core. It's just the way we communicate. We just communicate differently.
Yeah, we call it, I've blogged about this too. I call it the ostrich effect. Men just put their heads in the ground, sometimes women too, but men more often, and don't want to deal with it. And then you have to, and then even after they're in the process of the divorce and they've hired a lawyer, they're still pretending it's not happening, or trying to bargain it away or something. And if they had coaching that could really let them grieve, understand, process, then it would be better for everybody. It'd be better for them, for their ex, for their children, for all the professionals they're paying. They save money because they're ready to move forward. It reminds me of how when you said men are, they just hear this as complaining. They don't really understand the relationship is truly threatened by these complaints, because they're just like, Charlie Brown's teacher, right? You don't really, they don't really comprehend what's being said. And I think I mentioned this to you, that I've heard, women marry men hoping that they'll change, and men marry women expecting that they won't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Neither of those things are realistic. Of course, everybody changes, but at their own pace and at their own time, and you can't force it and you can't prevent it. So for all the people out there, just keep that in mind. So what do you think it is that makes men say, okay, this has happened, I don't have anyone to talk to? How do they find you? What makes them finally reach out to somebody they've never met to start talking about these things? Men don't normally gravitate to coaching or therapy. So what is it that you found has led men to finally pick up the phone or call you or email you or whatever it might be to get some coaching?
Well, first of all, I don't really ever use the word coach.
Oh,
I just don't use the word coach because we all, particularly as business owners, we've had coaches. Like we all know what a coach is, but most average people, most average men, when they think of coach, it's all in the sports context. That's really what it is. So when I start to use coach in talking to guys, it's always in the sports context because that's how guys understand. But really, the name of the company is Divorce Shield, and the men's group that we have is called the Men's Divorce Network. So I really keep away from the word coach. And then whenever guys get involved, they just see me. They see videos. They hear the podcast. They hear all these things, and they know what I'm talking about. They understand the concept of this person is someone I can talk to who can help me get through this. They don't necessarily say, "Oh, I need a divorce coach. Like they're not thinking like that. And that's really, I mean, I think that's where attorneys have been behind the eight ball for many years, is we all talk in our language. Like you have to learn to talk in the language of someone who knows nothing, who, has never been around divorce, doesn't know what a divorce coach is, doesn't know what mediation is, doesn't know what collaborative law is, someone who doesn't know anything. And you cannot just use those terms and say, this is what you should do. You have to explain a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. And so, really, when guys are reaching out, they're typing in things like help with my divorce, men's support groups. They're typing those things in to Google or whatever. And so that's how they're finding us. And then they're finding the podcast, they're finding the Facebook group, they're just finding all these resources. And that's really all I'm doing is just providing resources. I want more and more resources. And I'm very selective about who I coach, because not everyone needs like a ongoing coaching arrangement, because as you'll find out if you're getting into this space, a lot of people do not know the difference between a divorce coach and a divorce attorney in all respects. Sometimes they'll try to use a divorce coach as an attorney and vice versa. So it's very important to understand what the person needs. Like, what is it you need? Sometimes someone needs a 2-hour call just to talk about, here is your game plan. Remember, going back to the sports analogy, like on a basketball court, I'm going to draw up the play and I'm going to send you out on the court to do it. I'm not going to be there playing it with you. I'm just going to send you out there to do the play we talked about. And if it didn't work, come back and we'll do a new play. But I mean, that's really at its core how people find us. Is I don't use the word coach. I just talk about divorce support for men, and that's really what it's all about.
And do you know what makes them put in those search terms? Like what it is that's happened? Is it just that they've tried to deal with it and they can't? Like what's making them search for a divorce support group? Like where are they in their process when they come to you? What is there any commonality?
There is. It's usually they don't know what to do first. It's like, what do I do first? And they're probably searching for something along those lines. Like, what's the first step a man should do in a divorce, or what's the first thing a guy should do? Stuff like that. It's never about like alimony or custody or anything like that. It's just, what do I do first? What is the first thing I should do? How do I protect myself? It's very similar to what women probably search for, but there's certain people that will go right to an attorney because society sort of pushed everyone in that direction. But there's a lot of other people who they don't know. They just don't know. They're so in shock about what's going on. They do not know what to do. And so they just start, putting in things, and they always use something about a man, because I think they just assume, I don't want to be with women like my wife's divorcing me. Like they're not going to tell me how it is. So they end up coming here. And then I love it because they get into the Facebook group, and these guys are just constantly talking to each other, constantly telling, I mean, a lot of there's a lot of complaining. Obviously, I went to court the other day and this happened to me. And, can you believe my wife's asking for this? But the point is, it's a safe space where they can complain, they can express themselves, be heard, have other guys empathize with them, and at least give them that safe space to take it out in that form, as opposed to making their divorce worse.
Yes.
And, that's really what the important part is.
And when we talk about not making your divorce worse, a lot of that has to come down to the process that they choose and how to choose the right attorney. So can you say a little bit about that, what you do to help guide them in that decision and that part of the process?
Yeah, so I try to guide everyone into alternative dispute resolution, either mediation or collaborative law, something along those lines. And I've done, usually what I'll do is I routinely will put up like podcast interviews where we talked about collaborative law mediation, just so people can hear what the concepts are. Because again, people do not understand, like even mediation, people don't really understand what it is.
Sure.
So I just try to push everyone that direction. And then, as you know, it takes two to tango. You got to have wife on board too. So I spend a lot of time talking to my guys about, not only should you try to go into, I'll just use mediation for now. Should you try to go into mediation, but here's how maybe you should start to talk to your wife about it. You can't be scared. You have to make sure she knows that you don't want to fight, that you want a process that's going to be fair to both of you, and then decide whether or not they've got the kind of facts of their life where they really need to sit down with an attorney in a formal fashion to get a lot of advice before they start down the mediation road. Because again, misnomer that you have to have an attorney before you do mediation. Not everyone needs that. There's a lot of very simple divorces where a mediator can help you figure it all out without you getting legal advice. So that's really the key. Now, if someone needs an attorney, then part of what I do is I try to find them an attorney.
Mhm.
And I know people all over the place, but a lot of the guys that come to me are from small towns and smaller areas, smaller metro areas where I don't know people. So if I can't get a referral, then what I do is I at least look at the biography of the attorneys that are there and try to find somebody who, in my opinion, should have at least the experience to handle their case. And for us, that just usually means someone who predominantly practices family law, that doesn't dabble, that doesn't do real estate on Monday, family law on Tuesday, criminal law on Wednesday.
Right.
No, you know,
Or
so
law. Right.
which is but that's what people do. They're like, oh, John Smith's the attorney down on the corner, so I'm just going to go to his office and walk in there, and he'll do my divorce. He probably will, but he may never have done a divorce before.
That's
So
very common in small towns, not so much in the big cities, but in the smaller towns.
yeah.
Everything that you've learned, what any do you guide your female clients any differently now that you've learned what you've learned about men? Anything different that you tell the women that you're working with, or that you would tell a woman who's contemplating divorce?
Yeah, well, the ones that don't see, it's interesting, Andrea. There's two types of clients that come to my office now. The ones that already know they want mediation, and so those a lot of times they don't have this disparate positions because they both kind of are in the same page. They're ready to get it done. But the ones that come in the more traditional context, I just emphasize to them over and over again. I don't tell them, oh, I'm a men's divorce coach, so listen to me. I just try to tell them, like, listen, um, he's upset right now. All right. So sending this particular letter at this point in the case or doing this particular thing at this point in the case will be counterproductive. I was like, you have to trust me that, you need to give him a little bit of time. You don't have to do everything immediately in a divorce. Some things can wait. And so I just try to remind them that, they're, especially if I know that they tell me I've been thinking about it for a while and I just told him, he got very upset. I'll remind them that it's in their best interest to let him be upset, to let him go through this. Because if you push too much, you're going to end up spending all your money litigating. And it's just going to turn into a worse situation for you. So I really just do the opposite with them and just try to get them to understand that they need to just put themselves in their husband's shoes for just a second
Right.
if they want a better divorce, not to use your podcast name over and over again. But if they want a better divorce, that's really what you need to do.
Yeah, they have to slow down, and also, I'll see if you agree with me, set boundaries, because they might start trying to bargain and change your mind and convince you to do this or that. The men are going to push back, but like they have to get used to what's happening. But you also have to create, like, be sure that this is where you are, but not push too much right now. So there's like this balancing act that they have to deal with too. I think or whoever wants the divorce more than the other, um, be prepared for that pushback. So this has been so great because I've never had anyone on the show just to talk about a particular, gender and how they're dealing with divorce. So I really appreciate this, John. And so as I end all my podcasts, I have a question. What is the one better divorce tip that you would have for somebody thinking about divorce?
So you can never go into a divorce angry. And so what I mean by that is you need to find a way to channel your frustration and anger, and it cannot be through the divorce process. So whatever that means, exercise, go join a sports league for adults, go to therapy, get a divorce coach, Whatever it is, do not let the divorce process be an outlet for your anger. It will always backfire and you will always regret it.
It's a great piece of advice. I talked to somebody recently who she and her spouse had just decided to end the marriage. And I said, what did you do yesterday? She said, I went to a rage room and I just broke things, with like a sledgehammer, just went to one of those rage rooms. So get it out of your system any way that you can. And that was really smart, right? So don't go into your divorce angry. Don't go to bed angry. Don't go into your divorce angry. Thank you, John. That was wonderful. Thank you. So I am so glad you could join me today. And what are the best ways for people to find you, Divorce Shield, your law firm?
Well, so you can find us at gethappydivorce.com and thedivorceshield.com. Also, Instagram, we're very active on social media. Same handles, Get Happy Divorce and Divorce Shield.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, this has been another episode of A Better Divorce podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode. You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.